The CEO begged for a translator and never expected help to come from a janitor's child. The boardroom was silent, paralyzing, awkward silence. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Jonathan Crane, CEO of Crane Tech International, as he stood frozen at the head of the mahogany table. The French delegation had just finished their opening presentation, a rapid stream of eloquent French that washed over the American team like an ocean wave. Jonathan had smiled and nodded, pretending to catch a few words here and there, but inside panic was building. He had trusted the company's interpreter to show up. He had confirmed it. But now, in the most critical meeting of the quarter, no translator had arrived. His heart raced beneath his tailored navy suit and a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. If he messed this up, the $120 million partnership would be dead on arrival. He raised his hand timidly. "Je ne parle pas français," he said with a shaky accent. A few of the French executives chuckled politely, but the tension only thickened. Jonathan looked at his team, blank stares. His vice president of operations shrugged. The PR manager looked down, avoiding eye contact. Jonathan did something he had never done in his entire career. His voice cracked as he said, "Please, is anyone here able to translate? Please." The air was tight. Seconds passed like hours. He scanned the room again, still nothing. Then, like a whisper in the storm, a soft voice piped up from the far corner of the room. "I can help," it said, delicate, small, and clear. Heads turned. In the very back, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the double doors, was a little girl, no older than 8, with big brown eyes and a second-hand backpack clutched to her chest. She stood up timidly, stepping forward. Her t-shirt had a stain on the hem, and her shoes were too big for her tiny feet. Jonathan blinked, confused. "Who?" From the hallway, a woman in a janitor's uniform peeked in with a terrified expression. "I'm sorry, sir," she gasped. "She just wanted to see where I work. I told her to wait quietly. Please don't." But Jonathan held up a hand. The girl was already walking toward him. "I'm Emily," she said. "My mom cleans here, but I speak French. My grandma only speaks French, so I learned." Silence again. One of the French executives smiled, surprised. He turned to Emily and said a phrase in French, slowly. She nodded, then looked at Jonathan. "He said they'd like to understand your business goals and product line for the European market." Jonathan was stunned. "You understood that?" She nodded again, and just like that, a room full of tension shifted into possibility. Jonathan crouched slowly, now eye level with Emily. "Are you sure you can do this?" he asked, his voice lowered, careful not to scare her. But Emily's face was calm, her small chin raised with quiet certainty. She nodded. Behind her, her mother hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands, terror flashing across her face. "Please, sir, don't punish her. She's just a child. Jonathan didn't even look back. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emily. Emily Lambert." "Well, Miss Lambert, we could use a little miracle today." He stood and turned to the boardroom. "Gentlemen, we have our translator," he announced. The room shifted again. People straightened in their chairs. Some exchanged amused glances, others skeptical. But no one laughed. Not after Emily looked up at the French team and greeted them fluently, her accent nearly native, her diction precise and confident. As Emily translated Jonathan's introduction and business goals, the energy changed. The French delegates leaned in, nodded, asked questions. Emily didn't falter once. She moved between the two languages with grace and clarity, pausing only to glance up at Jonathan for confirmation of intent before delivering each sentence. Jonathan was mesmerized. Not only was the girl handling business terminology beyond her years, but she carried a poise that defied her age. Her mother stood outside the glass door, stunned, silent, her eyes glistening. By the end of the first hour, everyone in the room was smiling. Charts were shared, product samples discussed, and even a few jokes exchanged. Emily translated them all, sometimes even improving them slightly for clarity or tone. At one point, the French CFO made a sarcastic comment under his breath about the Americans' impressive ability to wing it. Emily looked up at Jonathan with a small smirk. He said he admires your improvisation, she said, choosing grace over literalness. Jonathan chuckled. Tell him we'll take that as a compliment. She did. As the meeting neared its close, one of the French delegates asked a technical question about product integration across EU privacy standards. Emily paused for a moment, processing. Then she asked Jonathan for clarification, rephrased his response, and delivered it in perfect French. The CFO blinked, clearly impressed. How old is she? He whispered to one of the Americans. 8, came the stunned reply. By the time the session ended, Jonathan extended his hand to the French CEO. Merci, he said with a respectful nod. Merci à vous, the man replied. He looked at Emily. And to your brilliant translator. Emily smiled shyly, but just as Jonathan was about to thank her, a man stepped into the room abruptly, tall, suited, and out of breath. I'm here, he cried. The interpreter. Sorry, train delay, The entire room looked at him, then back at Emily. You're late, Jonathan said simply. And unnecessary. The man blinked. What? Jonathan turned to Emily. How would you like to stay for lunch? He asked. And Emily, her small hand still clenched, whispered, I'd like that. The executive lunchroom was a place of polished marble, gold-accented fixtures, and quiet conversation over designer meals. Emily had never imagined a space like this existed above the floors her mother mopped. She sat carefully in a large leather chair, her feet not touching the ground, her backpack still strapped tight to her back. Jonathan sat beside her, his plate untouched as he watched her study the silverware with curiosity. You like spaghetti? He asked, offering her a gentler smile than anyone on his team had seen him wear in years. She nodded. With cheese, lots of cheese. He flagged down the waiter. 1 spaghetti, extra cheese, and a lemonade, please. The waiter, clearly confused, nodded and rushed off. Emily's mother stood awkwardly by the door, half in shadow. Mr. Crane, I can take her now. She's probably tired and... Jonathan turned. She saved our company's reputation today. I think she deserves a little celebration, don't you? The woman hesitated. She's just a little girl. I don't want her to be in trouble. Jonathan gestured to the chair across from them. Sit. Join us. Tears sprang to the woman's eyes, but she obeyed, lowering herself carefully onto the edge of the seat, still in her uniform. They sat in silence for a moment before Jonathan asked gently, How long have you been with the company? 7 years, she replied, brushing hair behind her ear. Mostly nights. Emily stays with my mother usually, but today school had a half day. I didn't have anyone to stay with her. Jonathan looked at Emily, then back at the woman. And she learned French from your mother? Yes. My mum only speaks French. She raised Emily with it, and she's always been a fast learner. She's more than that, Jonathan said quietly. She's extraordinary. Emily's plate arrived and she dug in with joy, twirling noodles and humming as she ate. For a few minutes, the room felt light, warm. But the moment of peace was broken when one of Jonathan's senior advisors entered, a stern man in a tailored suit who leaned down to whisper urgently in his ear. Jonathan's face changed. You're kidding, he muttered. The advisor shook his head. No, the board is already asking questions. And HR wants to know why a child was present in a closed-door meeting. Jonathan stood slowly, tension returning to his posture. Excuse me for a moment, he said, and walked out with the advisor. At the table, Emily stopped chewing. She could feel the mood shift. Did I do something wrong? She asked, voice trembling. Her mother reached across the table. No, baby, you were amazing. But even she didn't believe the words fully. In the hallway, Jonathan paced. She saved the damn deal, Paul. She translated flawlessly. The advisor nodded. Sure, but that won't matter to legal or PR. They're calling it a security breach. Some want to reprimand the janitor. Jonathan's jaw clenched. They want her gone, the advisor said. Today. Jonathan returned to the table with measured steps, but his expression betrayed a storm behind his eyes. Emily looked up at him with hopeful innocence, her fork still halfway to her mouth. Her mother was already beginning to rise, sensing the shift. "I think we should go," she began, but Jonathan raised a hand. "No, sit." His voice was calm but firm. He looked directly at Emily. "You didn't do anything wrong. What you did today was incredible. You helped bridge two worlds in a way no adult in that room could." Emily blinked. "But am I in trouble?" Jonathan crouched beside her chair, just as he had in the boardroom. "Not with me." Then he stood and turned to her mother. "But the board is nervous. They're talking about protocol violations and unauthorized personnel. HR wants an explanation. They want someone to blame." Her mother's face went pale. "They're going to fire me, aren't they?" Jonathan hesitated. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "But you're the CEO," she said, eyes wide. "Don't you decide?" He looked down, his voice low. "Not entirely, not anymore. We have shareholders, a board, politics." She exhaled, sinking deeper into her chair. "I can't lose this job," she whispered. "I can't. We just moved to a new place. I have payments, Emily's school." Jonathan's hand curled into a fist. "I'll fix this." Before she could respond, the elevator dinged. 3 men in grey suits stepped into the room, board members recognizable by their pins. They didn't acknowledge Jonathan or the woman as they made their way to a private corner table. Jonathan turned to the 2 quietly. "Stay here, please." He crossed the room with long, confident strides and intercepted the men. They looked surprised. "Jonathan," one of them said, "we heard about the interpreter mishap. Unfortunate, but luckily no damage done." "No damage," Jonathan replied, his voice tight. "We closed a major deal because of what happened." The second man raised a brow. "Yes, and now legal is asking why a child was in a high-level meeting. That's not standard procedure." Jonathan leaned in. "That child has more linguistic ability than any certified interpreter we've hired in 5 years. She's a prodigy." The third man scoffed. "That may be, but she's also 8, and she's not on the payroll." Jonathan's eyes darkened. "She is now." "What?" He didn't blink. "I'm offering her a consultant contract, language and cultural advisor, effective immediately. Pay it through marketing if you have to. I'm not letting the person who saved our deal walk out like a ghost." The 3 exchanged glances. "Do you really want a headline tomorrow reading, 'CEO fires janitor after her daughter saves multinational deal'?" Silence. Finally, one of them sighed. "You always did like your dramatic power plays, Jonathan." "I like justice," he snapped. Back at the table, Emily and her mother sat in silence. She finished her spaghetti, but her appetite was gone. Then Jonathan returned and placed something on the table, a sleek black company ID badge, with Emily's name on it. Emily stared at the ID badge on the table, her little fingers reaching out hesitantly to touch it. The plastic felt cold and smooth beneath her skin. Her name was printed in bold letters, Emily Lambert, language consultant. Beneath it, a small photo of her taken moments ago at the reception desk smiled back, her wild curls slightly tamed, her eyes wide and curious. Her mother's lips parted, but no sound came. She blinked several times, trying to understand what she was seeing. "What is this?" she finally whispered. Jonathan took a seat across from them, the weight of the day finally softening the lines around his eyes. "It's a temporary badge, but it's real. Emily is now officially part of Crane Tech." The woman shook her head, dazed. "She's 8. "She's also gifted," Jonathan said. "This isn't charity. I saw what she did today. She listened carefully, interpreted nuances, protected our image, and adapted in real time. That's not just intelligence. That's diplomacy." Emily looked from her mum to Jonathan. "Does this mean I can come back?" Jonathan smiled. "Yes, if you'd like. And you'll be compensated, just like any other contractor. We'll set up a trust fund for your work, so it'll be there when you need it. For school, college, whatever you want." Her mother covered her mouth with both hands. A small sob escaped her, but she quickly composed herself. "You don't have to do this." "I do," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "Because someone like her doesn't happen every day, and if we don't protect talent like hers, We're no better than the people who ignored us when we asked for help." Just then, Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Can I go see where they make the computers?" Jonathan laughed softly. "I think we can arrange that. We have a whole innovation floor. I'll take you myself." Emily beamed, but as they rose to leave, her mother hesitated. "Mr. Crane," she said. "Why are you really doing this?" Jonathan paused, hand on the elevator button. His eyes clouded, something shifting in them. He looked down at Emily, then back at her mother. "Because once, a long time ago, I was just a kid in a waiting room, and no one noticed me until it was too late. No one gave me a chance until I had to take one." Emily's mother didn't press him. She just nodded. As the elevator doors opened, Emily stepped inside, clutching her badge like treasure. Jonathan followed, and just before the doors closed, he turned and looked back. "By the way," he said, "we're having a company gala next week. I'd like you both to be there, as guests." Her mother blinked, stunned. "Guests?" He nodded. "Family night. Seems like a good time to introduce our newest consultant." The doors slid shut, and somewhere high above the janitor's closet, an elevator carried a little girl and a CEO toward a future neither of them could have predicted. The Crane Tech Gala sparkled with excess. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across sleek marble floors, and servers in black vests floated between clusters of executives holding champagne flutes. Music from a string quartet danced softly through the atrium, blending with the low hum of curated conversations. It was a night built for optics, luxury, and quiet power. But all eyes turned when Jonathan Crane entered the room, not alone but with an 8-year-old girl in a navy blue dress and sparkling shoes, and a woman in a modest gown beside her. Emily's curls had been brushed into soft waves, and she wore a silver necklace shaped like a tiny globe, Jonathan's gift. People didn't whisper, they stared. A few gasped quietly, board members straightened. The CFO from the French delegation, in town for the gala, lifted his glass with a respectful nod. Jonathan noticed everything but acknowledged none of it. He walked with quiet purpose, hand gently guiding Emily through the crowd. Her mother walked just behind, her expression caught between pride and disbelief. "Are you nervous?" Jonathan asked Emily under his breath. She nodded. "Kind of." "Good. That means you're paying attention." A tall woman in a red gown approached them. Lillian Gates, head of global partnerships, and one of the board's more calculating voices. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "Jonathan," she greeted, "and you must be Emily. I've heard quite a lot about you." Emily offered a polite nod. "Bonsoir," she said. Lillian blinked, then smiled a touch more genuinely. "Enchanté." Jonathan turned. "Lillian, this is Emily's mother, Miss Lambert." The woman offered a soft handshake, clearly unsure how to position herself in this world of designer gowns and whispered alliances. Lillian's eyes narrowed slightly, then flicked to Jonathan. "You've certainly made waves with this unconventional mentorship." Jonathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Innovation requires bold moves." "Or reckless ones," Lillian said sweetly. "There's talk. Some are questioning the optics of this arrangement." "Let them question," he said. "She's already proven her value." But Lillian wasn't done. "Off the record, John, what's the real story here? A girl shows up out of nowhere, saves a deal, and now she's your protégé. Doesn't that strike you as convenient?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, Emily tugged on his sleeve. "Can I show her the contract you gave me?" she asked innocently, holding up a little folder Jonathan had made with mock consultant credentials inside. Lillian stared. Jonathan chuckled. "She's very organized." Before Lillian could press further, a photographer called out, "Mr. Crane, a photo, please." Jonathan placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Let's give them something real to talk about." They posed together, CEO and child, under the chandelier. The camera clicked, but far across the room a man stood half in shadow, watching silently. His eyes weren't on Jonathan, they were on Emily. The man near the bar nursed a glass of water, his gaze fixed on Emily with unsettling intensity. He was tall, well-dressed, but unfamiliar to most of the guests. When approached by a server offering hors d'oeuvres, he waved them off without a word. His focus remained unbroken. Meanwhile, Emily basked in the attention of a small crowd that had gathered after the photo. Executives, charmed by her composure and fluent French, leaned down to chat with her. She responded thoughtfully, even correcting one man's pronunciation with a giggle that earned her a round of laughter. Her mother, still uneasy in her heels, stayed a step behind. She kept scanning the room, feeling the weight of stares, unsure if they were admiration or judgment. Jonathan rejoined them, holding 2 lemonades. "For the lady of the hour," he said, handing one to Emily. She beamed. "Thank you, Mr. Crane." "Jonathan," he corrected gently. "We're colleagues now." They both laughed, but the laughter faded when the tall man approached. Jonathan saw him first. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of recognition, confusion, and then unease. "Do I know you?" Jonathan asked, as the man stopped just a few feet away. The man's voice was low, smooth, but carried a weight behind it. "Not yet, but she might." He looked at Emily. Jonathan instinctively stepped in front of her, his hand brushing hers protectively. Emily peered around him, her brow furrowing. "Do I know you, sir?" The man's eyes softened. "You look just like your grandmother." Her mother stepped forward sharply. "What did you just say?" The man's gaze met hers. "Colette Lambert from Marseille. She used to sing French lullabies to her granddaughter while folding laundry. Said she'd name her after her favorite novel." Jonathan's eyes darted to Emily's mother, whose face had gone completely pale. "How do you know that?" she whispered. The man stepped closer. "Because I'm her father." Silence fell like a thunderclap. Emily's mother backed up a step. "That's not possible." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a worn photograph. In it, a young man with dark curls held a baby girl, a woman beside him smiling weakly from a hospital bed. "I left because I had no choice," he said, "but I followed every step from afar. I knew she'd be special." Jonathan looked between them, suddenly unsure where to stand. Emily stepped closer, studying the photo. "That's Grandma. But who's the baby?" Her mother's voice cracked. "That's you." Emily looked up slowly. "So, he's my grandfather?" The man's voice trembled now. "Yes. I've waited years to say that out loud." Jonathan felt the air shift again, not with tension this time, but something heavier, something that smelled like truth, or maybe danger, because the man's eyes, though kind, held something else, a secret. The gala lights seemed to dim around them, the distant music drowned out by the silence that followed the man's revelation. Emily held the photograph with both hands, studying the baby's face as if trying to find herself in it. Her mother didn't move. Her face was frozen in disbelief, every muscle tight with tension. Jonathan cleared his throat, stepping between the man and Emily again. "If this is true, you need to explain why now, why tonight?" The man's eyes didn't leave Emily. "Because I never thought I'd see her in a place like this. I heard about what happened at the board meeting. A little girl who spoke flawless French and helped close a deal. The story reached the French press. I recognized the name. I had to come." Emily's mother snapped. "You had to? After 8 years of silence? After vanishing from our lives like we were a mistake?" "I didn't vanish," he said softly. "I was told to leave." She shook her head, voice trembling. "That's a lie." "No," he said, a little firmer now. "It was your mother who told me you never wanted to see me again, that I was a mistake. She threatened to report me, said I would ruin your life. I was 20 and scared. I believed her." The pain in Emily's mother's face shifted, twisting into something more fragile, more haunted. "You were 20, and I was 18. She was protecting me, or maybe just herself." Jonathan watched the emotional minefield unfold before him, unsure whether to intervene. His instincts as a leader battled with something else, something deeply personal. This wasn't business. This was blood. Emily looked up at her mum. "Is it true?" Her mother blinked back tears. "I don't know anymore, baby. I don't know what's true." The man knelt down in front of Emily, his voice gentle. "I've missed everything. Your first words, your first day of school. I don't deserve a place in your life, but I had to try. I had to see you once. Jonathan cut in, voice cool. And what do you want from her now? Nothing, the man replied. No custody, no rights, just a chance to know her. Even from a distance. Emily reached out, surprising everyone, and touched his hand lightly. Do you speak French too? He smiled. I do. Your grandmother taught me too. She nodded, absorbing everything like a sponge. Then maybe you can tell me a story. In French. The man's face crumbled, years of guilt, longing and love breaking through. He nodded. I'd like that, he said. But as the moment softened, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and frowned. The message read, Urgent. French delegates requesting clarification on identity of young translator. Media inquiry expected. And beneath it, who is she, really? Jonathan looked at Emily, then at the man. Something didn't add up. Jonathan stepped away from the trio, phone still in hand, the screen casting a faint glow across his unsettled expression. The message looped in his mind. Who is she, really? It wasn't just a curiosity. It was a warning. A signal that others were beginning to dig, to question, to connect dots he hadn't even considered yet. He looked back at Emily, now sitting with the man, her supposed grandfather, who was softly speaking to her in French. She smiled faintly, her head tilted, listening to his voice like it was music. Her mother sat beside them, silent, trembling fingers pressed to her lips. Jonathan made a decision. He returned, his tone more formal now. I need to speak with you, he said to the man. The man nodded, rising. They stepped into a quiet hallway off the ballroom. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses were distant here, muffled behind a thick velvet curtain. Jonathan folded his arms. You said your name is Lucien Girard. Jonathan raised a brow. French? Yes. Marseille. I met Colette, Emily's grandmother, at university. And you claim to be Emily's grandfather, but no one in this building knows you. No records. No history. Lucien's jaw tightened. I didn't come here with documents. I came with memories and love. Jonathan's voice lowered. You came here with a lie, didn't you? Lucien didn't answer. Jonathan stepped closer. Because I looked into Emily's file, her mother's employment history, emergency contacts, no mention of you. Ever. Lucien sighed. That doesn't mean I'm not who I say I am. But it means I can't trust you, Jonathan said coldly. Not until I know the full story. Lucien's eyes burned. You think because you gave that little girl a badge and a gala dress that you understand her life? You don't. You understand deals, not people. I understand threats, Jonathan said sharply. And right now, you're waving every red flag I've seen in my career. You show up at a public event, target a child with high-level attention, and claim a lost family connection with no proof. Lucien looked wounded, but didn't back down. I waited too long, that's true, but I didn't come to hurt her. I came because I couldn't live another day without trying. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. Then prove it. Lucien frowned. How? DNA, tomorrow, quietly. If you're who you say you are, I'll make it official. But if not... He didn't finish the sentence. Lucien nodded slowly. Fine. Jonathan turned to leave, but paused. One more thing. If you're lying about anything, I'll bury you legally. You won't see a courtroom. You'll see a cell. Lucien stared back. You sound like a father. Jonathan froze, caught off guard, then walked away. Back in the ballroom, Emily had fallen asleep on her mother's lap. The crowd was thinning, the music slowing. And from the shadows, Lillian Gates watched the whole hallway exchange, smiling. The following morning, the Crane Tech executive wing was uncharacteristically quiet. Jonathan arrived early, before the building filled with the usual buzz of meetings and mechanical routines. He stood in the executive conference room alone, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, waiting. At precisely 8:30 a.m., The door opened. Lucienne entered, solemn and silent. Emily's mother followed, looking unsure but resolute. And finally Emily, clutching her sketchbook, her hair still slightly messy from sleep. Jonathan greeted them with a nod, offering seats. On the table were 2 small envelopes, testing kits marked with discreet labels. No one spoke as they sat. A company physician arrived minutes later, kind and professional, explaining the simple cheek swab process and the confidentiality of results. Emily, sensing the tension, whispered, "Will it hurt?" "Not at all," Jonathan assured her. One by one the samples were taken. Emily was last, swabbing her cheek with wide eyes. Jonathan made a silent vow as he watched her. Whatever this reveals, I protect her, no matter what. The doctor excused himself with the samples. "We'll have preliminary results by this afternoon." Lucienne stood. "May I wait here?" Jonathan hesitated, then gestured to the seating area. "You can wait." Hours passed slowly. Emily sketched quietly in the corner. Her mother stared out the window, arms crossed, eyes distant. Lucienne sat motionless, his fingers folded, as if in prayer. At 3:12 p.m. the doctor returned, a sealed envelope in hand. Jonathan took it, heart pounding. He opened it carefully, scanning the short paragraph inside. Silence. He looked up at Lucienne, then Emily's mother. "It's a match," he said quietly. "Lucienne is Emily's biological grandfather." Her mother gasped. A sob escaped her lips, quickly stifled. Lucienne didn't smile. He simply closed his eyes, the weight of years sinking into his shoulders. Emily looked up. "So, he's really my family?" Jonathan nodded. "Yes." Lucienne turned to her slowly. "Only if you want me to be." She stood, walked to him, and placed her tiny hand on his. "I think I'd like to learn more," she said. Her mother wiped her tears. "I need time," she whispered to Lucian. "I'll wait," he replied. "I've waited this long." Jonathan rose. "Then it's settled. We'll proceed carefully, but we'll make room for the truth." As the family began to process the news, Jonathan excused himself, but as he stepped out into the hallway, Lillian was already waiting. "So," she said, arms crossed, "a perfect twist. A grandfather shows up, a genius girl wins the world's heart, and the company looks like a beacon of humanity. Convenient." Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "What are you implying?" Lillian smiled. "Nothing. Yet. But investors want to know more about Emily, about her sudden rise, and if they find anything—" She left the rest hanging in the air. Jonathan's fists clenched, because now he realized this wasn't just a family story. It was becoming a war. 3 days later, Emily sat in the back seat of a sleek black company car, her sketchbook open on her lap, pencil dancing across the page. She was drawing a bridge, wide and long, spanning 2 distant cliffs, one marked past and the other future. On the bridge stood a small girl with curls holding a translator's badge. Beside her, her mother stared out the window, silent. The company driver glanced at them occasionally in the rearview mirror, his eyes soft with curiosity. It wasn't every day he chauffeured an 8-year-old who had made headlines around the world. The gala photo had gone viral. Headlines read, "The translator girl who saved a Fortune 500 deal." Social media buzzed with hashtags. Emily's story wasn't just known, it was legendary. And with fame came scrutiny. At headquarters, Jonathan sat at the head of the boardroom table, facing a crowd of grim-faced directors. Lillian Gates stood near the whiteboard, her arms folded, a series of photos and documents arrayed behind her like ammunition. "We have a problem," she said, her voice sharp. "The media love her. Investors are calling her a prodigy. But the auditors, the lawyers, they're calling it a liability." Jonathan leaned back unimpressed. "The child saved us. She deserves credit." "This isn't about credit," Lillian snapped. "This is about exposure. Questions are surfacing. How did a janitor's daughter gain access to a restricted meeting? Who authorized it? Who failed to vet Lucien Girard before allowing him into a public event?" Jonathan stood. I did. And I'll do it again. A murmur passed through the room. One board member, older and more measured, spoke up. John, this is no longer just internal. There are whispers about embezzlement, about whether Emily was planted to generate publicity. Jonathan's eyes blazed. How you think I would use a child for PR? Lillian pounced. Not you, but someone might. Someone with more to gain. All eyes turned to the screen as she clicked a remote. A photo appeared. Lucienne Gerard, years younger, shaking hands with a known lobbyist. Another slide, a bankruptcy record from a decade ago. Another, court records sealed in France. Jonathan stepped forward. Are you saying Lucienne is manipulating this for personal gain? I'm saying we don't know who we're dealing with, Lillian said. And while you're emotionally entangled, the company is exposed. Jonathan's fist slammed the table. Then dig, but you leave Emily out of it. She's at the center of it, Lillian replied coldly, whether she wants to be or not. Across town, Emily stepped out of the car and looked up at the towering glass building with wide eyes. Today she was invited to observe a live international meeting, her first official appearance as a language consultant. But as she entered the lobby, a man in a blazer approached, kneeling to her level. Emily Lambert, he asked gently. She nodded. He handed her a cream-colored envelope. You've been summoned to appear with your guardian for a formal review. Effective immediately. Her mother took the envelope, hands shaking. Emily didn't understand, but Jonathan would. Jonathan read the summons twice, then a third time, his jaw tightening with each pass. It wasn't just a formality, it was a veiled threat, an internal review disguised as procedure meant to cast shadows where there had been light. The company's legal team had been careful with its wording, but the message was clear. Emily's presence, her role, and even her relationship to Lucienne were all under investigation. He looked up at Emily, who sat calmly beside her mother in the small waiting room outside the board chamber. She was humming softly, legs swinging beneath her chair, unaware of the tension infecting every adult in the building. Her mother sat stiffly, clutching her purse with white knuckles. Jonathan crouched beside them. When we go in there, just be honest, he said gently. Don't let their suits scare you. They're just people who forgot what courage looks like. Emily looked up at him. Will they be mad? He smiled faintly. They'll be confused. That's scarier for them than anger. She nodded, then held out her hand. Jonathan took it without hesitation. Moments later, they were ushered inside. The boardroom, once the scene of Emily's triumphant debut, now felt like a courtroom. The same executives who had applauded her before now sat behind nameplates and legal pads, guarded and silent. Lillian Gates presided from the center seat. We'll keep this brief, she began, her voice clipped. This review concerns the nature of Emily Lambert's involvement in recent company affairs, her status, and any potential conflicts of interest related to her familial connections, particularly with Mr. Lucien Gerard. Jonathan remained standing. You'll address your concerns to me. Lillian raised an eyebrow. Respectfully, Mr. Crane, this is not your hearing. He didn't sit. It's my company. Technically, it belongs to the shareholders. Emily's mother, clearly overwhelmed, spoke up. We didn't do anything wrong. My daughter was just being herself. Lillian turned. Ma'am, you were aware your daughter was not authorized to be present in a secure business meeting, correct? I didn't mean for her to be. She was waiting, that's all. She heard French and she just helped. Convenient, Lillian muttered. Jonathan cut in. You want to know if this was staged? If I orchestrated a media stunt with a child? Then say it. Out loud. No one answered. Emily looked around, confused. Why are they mad? Jonathan knelt beside her again. They're scared. You did something big and some people don't like what they don't understand. Emily stood suddenly, surprising everyone. Her voice was small but clear. I didn't lie, I just wanted to help my mum. And when Mr. Crane asked if anyone could translate, I thought, if I didn't say something, he might lose his job. A silence fell over the room. I didn't want anyone to be scared, not even the people speaking French. Lillian's lips parted, but no words came. Then Emily pulled something from her sketchbook, a new drawing. It showed a courtroom, with stern judges on one side and a little girl holding a balloon on the other. Between them, a bridge. She placed it on the table. "I built that," she said. The boardroom was still as Emily's drawing rested on the polished table like a silent accusation. The board members stared, some shifting uncomfortably. Others studied the image with curiosity, even guilt. Jonathan remained beside her, his jaw clenched, his pride unmistakable. Lillian finally broke the silence, but her voice had softened. "Emily, do you understand what this company does?" The girl nodded. "You build things, mostly machines and programs, but also trust." The room reacted, not with laughter, but something deeper. Reflection. Jonathan rose to his feet. "Are we seriously going to continue pretending this child is a threat? She's 8. She didn't sneak in. She stepped up when no one else did." Lillian tapped her pen. "It's not about whether she meant harm. It's about precedent, security, liability. And what precedent do we want?" Jonathan countered. "One where we punish courage, or one where we recognize brilliance wherever it appears?" A board member at the far end cleared his throat. "With respect, John, we need to consider the fallout. Investors are nervous, legal is wary, and there's still the matter of Lucien Girard." Jonathan turned sharply. "Lucien passed the DNA test. He's who he says he is." Another member asked, "And yet he has a history we didn't know about. Financial trouble, political connections." "I know," Jonathan said. "I looked into it myself. But none of that changes Emily's actions or her worth." At that moment, the door opened. Lucien entered, uninvited, unannounced, but calm. "I heard my name," he said. The board stirred. Jonathan didn't stop him. Instead, he stepped aside. Lucien walked to the center of the room. "I don't want anything from this company," he began. "Not money, not status, not protection. I only came back for my granddaughter, to try and earn a second chance." He turned to Emily, who met his gaze with a quiet smile. "I left once," he continued. "Not by choice, but I left. And I've spent every day regretting it. Now I have a chance to be a part of something better. Not just in her life, but here." He looked to the board. "Let me contribute, give me a chance to help, not as a grandfather, but as someone who understands bridges, between people, between countries, between pain and healing." Silence again. Then, slowly, one of the board members nodded. "He has a point." Another added, "We need new faces, new voices." Even Lillian didn't object. Her jaw was tight, but she sat back in her chair. Jonathan turned to Emily. "Would you like that, if Lucien worked with us?" Emily grinned. "Only if I still get to correct your French." The room laughed, genuinely. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in policy or legality, but in culture, in belief, because the little girl who'd once sat in the shadows had now redrawn the company's moral compass. But as the meeting adjourned, Lillian lingered, and in her hand, hidden from sight, was a folder, a file, with Emily's birth certificate, and a name scratched out. The sound of office life resumed after the meeting, but a different current ran beneath it now, a current of possibility. Emily and her mother were escorted to the elevator by Jonathan, the mood light, almost celebratory. Employees nodded as they passed, some whispering her name with admiration, others simply smiled. As the elevator doors closed, Emily turned to Jonathan. "That was kind of like a movie," Jonathan chuckled. "The best ones are real." Her mother looked at him, gratitude flickering behind her eyes. "Thank you for standing by us." "I didn't do it out of charity," he replied. "I did it because the right person showed up at the right time and reminded us all why we started this company in the first place." Back upstairs, Lucien lingered near the windows, gazing out over the skyline. He felt like a man reborn, but also exposed, no longer a ghost, but not yet a full part of the living. That's when Lillian approached. "You played your part well," she said coolly. Lucienne turned, wary. "Excuse me?" She held up the folder. "You might have convinced everyone in that room, but I don't forget details." He took a step closer. "What do you have?" She opened the file. Inside, Emily's birth certificate. But the name of the father had been redacted. Not blank, removed. Lucienne frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Lillian leaned in. "I'm suggesting there's still something missing. You passed a DNA test as her grandfather, yes? But who is her father?" Lucian's face darkened. "That's not public record." "Exactly," Lillian said, flipping the page. "But what if someone powerful had reason to hide it?" Lucian swallowed. "I've seen this before," she continued. "A scandal buried to protect a name, but it never stays buried." Lucienne's voice dropped. "That's not your concern." "Oh, but it is," Lillian whispered. "Because I'm not the only one looking. Investors are curious. Journalists even more so." She paused, studying him. "Do you know who Emily's real father is, Lucienne?" He didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. "You need to tell Jonathan," she said, "or I will." Lucienne's eyes narrowed. "You'll destroy him." "I'll protect the company," she corrected. "That's my job. You should have thought of that before coming back." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing down the hallway like a metronome counting down time. Lucienne stared at the file, heart racing. The name had been erased for a reason, one he had never questioned. Until now. Back in the elevator, Emily looked up at her mother. "Do I have a dad somewhere?" Her mother hesitated. "Of course you do. Will I ever meet him?" A long pause. "I hope not," she whispered. But she didn't know Emily had heard her, and in her little heart, a new question was born. That evening, the city glowed in gold and violet as sunset poured over the skyline. Jonathan sat alone in his penthouse, glass of untouched whiskey in hand, staring out the window but not really seeing. The day's revelations weighed heavily on him, but it wasn't just the board meeting or Lillian's warnings. It was a feeling, a gut instinct he couldn't shake. He reached for his phone and opened the email from HR. Attached was Emily's personnel file, sanitized, approved, and now publicly shareable as part of the company's youth mentorship campaign. But he scrolled past the photos and press quotes until he hit the details: name, age, mother's name, and then the glaring blank under father. He stared at it for a long time. Then he called an old friend, a private investigator. "I need a background check," he said. "Discreet, on a girl named Emily Lambert, 8 years old, start with her birth records. Something's missing." The man on the other end hesitated. "You think the file's been altered?" "I don't know, but I need to." Meanwhile, across town, Lucien stood in his daughter's apartment. Emily was asleep, curled up with her sketchbook beside her. Her mother stood near the kitchen, arms crossed. "You shouldn't have come here tonight," she said quietly. "I needed to," Lucien replied. "She deserves the truth." Her voice was sharper now. "And what truth is that exactly? That her father was a mistake? That I was young and scared and lied to my own daughter for years?" Lucien looked down. "She's going to find out eventually. Not if I can help it. She's already asking questions." Her mother's hands shook. "You don't know what he was like, what he did, why I erased his name, why I had to." Lucien took a step closer. "Then tell me. Because if he comes back, if someone uncovers this before she's ready, what happens then?" Silence, heavy and haunted. Lucien pressed. "Who is he?" She looked away, tears brimming. "Someone you know." He blinked. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Someone you introduced me to, back when you were working on that French-American business exchange. The intern from New York, remember?" Lucien's breath caught. "You don't mean—" "I do," she whispered. "Jonathan Crane." The room swayed. Lucien gripped the counter. "That's impossible. He would have said something. He never knew. I never told him. Lucienne stared at her. You're saying Emily is his daughter? She nodded, breaking. Yes. Back at the penthouse, Jonathan's phone buzzed. A message from the investigator. Found birth certificate. Name of father scratched, but recovered from original hospital log. Then, a single line. Father, Jonathan Michael Crane. Jonathan dropped the glass. Whiskey spilled across the floor, mixing with shards of crystal. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew shattered. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study long after the sun rose, the morning light creeping across forgotten papers and unopened emails. The investigator's message remained on his phone, glowing like a wound he couldn't look away from. Emily is my daughter. The thought repeated like a drumbeat, steady and cruel. His mind flooded with memories, moments he had dismissed, gestures from Emily that had stirred something deeper than admiration. Her intelligence, her humor, even the way she wrinkled her nose when confused, it was all there, hiding in plain sight. He thought of her eyes. My God. At 6:45 a.m., he made a call. Lucien. We need to talk. Now. They met at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from headquarters. Jonathan arrived first, tie loosened, hair unruly. Lucien showed up minutes later, already tense, his face shadowed with the weight of what he now knew. Jonathan didn't waste time. She's mine, he said, voice low. Lucien nodded slowly. Yes. Jonathan leaned forward. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know. Not until last night. She never said. Her mother? Lucien hesitated. She says she was protecting Emily. That she was scared. Jonathan exhaled sharply. I would have done anything for them. I believe you. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Lucien asked, What will you do now? Jonathan's fingers tapped the table. First, I'm going to talk to her. To Emily. Not as a CEO, as her father. Lucien nodded. She'll ask why you didn't come sooner. Jonathan's face cracked. And I won't have a good answer. Across the city, Emily woke to the smell of pancakes. Her mother was bustling in the kitchen, forcing brightness into every movement, as if cooking could distract her from the earthquake of the night before. Can I draw today? Emily asked, yawning. Of course, her mother replied quickly. Anything you want. But before Emily could pick up her sketchbook, there was a knock at the door. She opened it. Jonathan stood there. His tie was gone, his shirt was wrinkled, and in his hands was a small music box, a delicate wooden one, shaped like a globe. Emily tilted her head. Mr. Crane? He knelt slowly. Hi, Emily. Her mother appeared behind her, heart caught in her throat. I came to see you, Jonathan said softly. Not for work, not for business. Just for you. Emily's eyes widened. Are we going to build another bridge? He swallowed hard. If you'll let me. But this one's just between you and me. Her mother stepped forward, eyes glassy. Jonathan, maybe we should talk first. He shook his head. Later, please. Let me talk to her first. He turned back to Emily. There's something I need to tell you, he said, and then slowly he opened the music box. Inside, a lullaby played, and tucked beneath the lid was a photo of Jonathan, younger, holding a baby girl. Emily stared at the photo inside the music box, her brows pulling together. She reached out and lifted it gently, her fingers brushing the old faded paper. The baby in the picture had a round face, curly hair, and a dimple on her left cheek, just like hers. That's me, she said softly. Jonathan nodded, his voice tight. Yes, that's you. Her mother watched from behind, holding her breath. But how? Emily asked. When was this? Jonathan looked up at her with eyes filled with something deeper than sadness, regret, wonder, love, long buried. A long time ago. Your mom and I, we were very young. I didn't know. She didn't tell me. If I had known, I would have been there. Emily looked back at her mother. Is it true? Her mother nodded, eyes shimmering. Yes, baby. It's true. The world seemed to slow. Emily sat down cross-legged in the doorway, holding the photo in one hand and the music box in the other. So you're... my dad? Jonathan's breath hitched. Yes. Emily didn't move. She just stared at him, her little mind processing the weight of the moment with quiet resilience. Then, after a long silence, she asked, "Why didn't you come to my school plays?" Jonathan's face broke. "Because I didn't know I was supposed to." She nodded, still solemn. "Okay." He swallowed hard. "But if you'll let me, I want to come to the next one, and the one after that, as many as you'll let me." Emily looked down at the music box. "It plays the song Grandma used to sing." Jonathan blinked. "Your grandmother, Colette." She nodded. "She sang it when I was little. Mommy said she taught it to someone once, a boy who used to study with her." Jonathan's voice cracked. "That boy was me." She looked up at him, for the first time with something more than curiosity in her eyes, recognition. "I always wondered why I liked that song so much," she whispered. He reached for her hand, pausing just before touching her. "May I?" She placed her small hand in his. It was enough. Her mother turned away, wiping her face. Later, they sat around the breakfast table. Emily insisted Jonathan try her perfect pancake flip and laughed when he failed. The tension faded, replaced by cautious hope. But the peace didn't last. Jonathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. The message read, "New inquiry from financial regulator. Questioning nepotism, misuse of funds regarding minor employee. Press has wind of CEO's secret daughter." His heart sank. He looked at Emily, her laughter still echoing, and knew the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The story broke 2 hours later. A headline exploded across major news sites. CEO's secret daughter revealed. Crane Tech's child prodigy sparks ethics investigation. Within minutes, social media lit up. Photos of Emily at the gala, the boardroom, even clips of her translating during the pivotal French meeting were everywhere. The public reaction was a storm. Awe at her brilliance, outrage over perceived favoritism, and 1,000 conspiracy theories in between. Jonathan stood in his office staring at the screen. His phone vibrated non-stop. Calls from PR, legal, board members, even journalists. But none of it mattered compared to the image that haunted him. Emily's trusting eyes that morning. Lucien entered without knocking. "It's out." "I know," Jonathan muttered. "They got everything." Lucien crossed his arms. "What do you want to do?" Jonathan turned slowly. "Protect her, at all costs." "But what about the company?" Jonathan's jaw tensed. "If I have to choose between the company and my daughter," Lucien didn't let him finish, "you may have to." Elsewhere, Emily and her mother sat in their small living room, the television turned off, but the tension in the room louder than any broadcast. Her mother paced, voice raw. "They've made her into a headline," she said, choking on the words. "She's 8. She doesn't understand any of this." Emily, seated on the floor, looked up. "Did I do something wrong?" Her mother dropped to her knees beside her. "No, never. You did everything right." "Then why is everyone mad?" Her mother wrapped her arms around her. "Because grown-ups get scared when children do big things." Back at Crane Tech, an emergency board meeting had been called. Lillian Gates led it, her voice steady and cold. "We are in crisis mode. The press is painting Jonathan as a manipulator. Investors are threatening to pull out unless we take immediate action." Jonathan entered mid-sentence. "Then take action, just not against her." Lillian didn't flinch. "The optics are bad, John. It looks like you used a child, your own daughter, for corporate gain. Appointing her without disclosure, that's not just risky, it's unethical. She wasn't appointed, Jonathan snapped. She earned her place in that room. She saved the company when no one else could. And yet, another board member said carefully, you're her father. That changes everything. Silence settled like a fog. Jonathan looked at them, eyes burning. You're right. I made mistakes. I should have come clean the moment I knew, but I won't punish her for my silence. Lillian's voice was colder now. Then we'll have to consider removing you. The room reacted. Shock, whispers, tension. Jonathan stared her down. You want to strip me of my title? Fine, but you try to erase that little girl from this story, and I will go to the press myself. You're risking everything, she warned. I'm choosing everything that matters. Outside the glass doors, Emily waited, not knowing her future was being decided again. The following day, Crane Tech's front entrance was flooded with reporters, their cameras pointed toward the revolving glass doors like a firing squad. News vans lined the curb, and boom mics stretched over the heads of security guards attempting to maintain order. Behind the tinted windows, executives whispered and watched, afraid of what might come next. But inside the private conference wing, the atmosphere was heavier. Jonathan sat with Emily and her mother in a smaller, sunlit room. It was a space typically used for internal interviews, now transformed into a quiet sanctuary for a conversation no child should ever have to hear. Emily sat curled in a chair holding her sketchbook. She wasn't drawing today. I saw the pictures on Mommy's phone, she said quietly. Jonathan exchanged a glance with her mother, who gave a slow, pained nod. Emily's voice was barely audible. Everyone knows now. Yes, Jonathan replied gently. They do. Are they going to take me away? Jonathan knelt beside her chair. No, never. Her mother leaned forward, eyes brimming. We'll fight this together, baby. No one's taking anything. Emily looked at them both. But if I'm your daughter, and you're the boss, and I helped the company, doesn't that look like cheating? Jonathan hesitated. It looks complicated, to some people. But the truth is, you didn't help the company because of who I am. You helped it because of who you are. Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words with the maturity of someone far older than 8. Her mother touched her shoulder. There's a meeting this afternoon with people who make big decisions. We want to bring you, but only if you're ready. Emily stared down at her sketchbook, then turned to a blank page. In slow, deliberate strokes, she began to draw. An anchor, wrapped in ivy. Jonathan watched her. What does that mean? It means no matter what the storm does, she said softly. I'm not letting go. Later that day, the board convened once again, this time in a secure conference hall, media kept at bay, nerves at their peak. Jonathan stood at the front, but he wasn't alone. Emily walked in beside him. Whispers erupted. Shocked faces turned, but no one dared interrupt. Jonathan raised a hand. Before we vote, before we throw more stones, you should hear from her. He stepped aside. Emily faced the room of adults, her feet barely reaching the floor of the speaking platform. She took a breath. I didn't know who my dad was, she said. I just knew that he asked for help, and I spoke up. She held up her drawing. This is an anchor. It holds things in place, even in scary weather. She looked straight at Lillian. You don't have to like me, but don't make people afraid of helping others. The room fell silent. And then, slowly, someone began to clap. The applause began softly, uncertain, respectful, but grew stronger with each passing second. One board member stood, then another, until half the room was on their feet, clapping not just for Emily's words, but for her courage. The moment was electric, not rehearsed or corporate. It was human. Jonathan stood in the corner, watching it unfold with a knot in his throat. Lillian, still seated, clutched a pen in her hand so tightly it trembled, but even she couldn't deny the shift in the air. She looked around, realizing that the momentum she had carefully built was slipping from her grasp, not because of corporate spin or legal maneuvering, but because an 8-year-old girl had spoken a truth no one could argue. When the applause faded, Emily stepped down from the platform and walked straight to her mother, who wrapped her in a fierce embrace. Jonathan approached, placing a hand gently on both of their shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Lillian rose at last. "Jonathan," she said evenly, "we'll schedule a follow-up review privately." Jonathan nodded. "Of course." She turned to Emily. "You surprised me." Emily tilted her head. "I do that a lot." For the first time, Lillian almost smiled. Outside, the news spread quickly. The board had voted not to pursue disciplinary action against Jonathan or Emily. The company would release a statement clarifying the timeline, their familial connection, and Emily's contributions as authentic and unscripted. The narrative shifted once again, this time from suspicion to redemption. That night, Jonathan, Emily, and her mother returned to the penthouse. Dinner was simple: spaghetti, lemonade, and laughter. Emily showed them her newest sketches, this one of a tree with 3 names carved into its trunk: Emily, Mom, Dad. As the evening quieted, Jonathan tucked her into bed, unsure if he had the right, but unable to resist. "Tell me a story," she asked. He nodded, pulling up a chair. "Once there was a man who thought he had everything: a company, a title, a tower that touched the sky. But one day he met a girl with a backpack and a voice like sunlight." She giggled sleepily. "Was she magical?" "More than that," he said. "She was real, and she reminded him what really mattered." Her eyes fluttered shut, a small smile lingering. Jonathan stayed by her side long after she fell asleep, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, as if afraid she might vanish if he looked away. Downstairs, her mother watched from the balcony, sipping tea, wondering what came next, because no matter how beautiful the ending felt, there was one question left, one truth no one had dared ask yet. If Jonathan never knew he had a daughter, then who had made sure he never found out? And as Lillian Gates opened a private letter in her apartment across town, she read the paternity results again, and stared at the signature of the doctor who falsified the first test. The next morning began with a knock, not a soft, polite one, but a deliberate rap against glass. Jonathan looked up from his coffee, heart already heavy from sleepless hours, to see Lucienne standing on the terrace outside the penthouse, holding a manila envelope. He opened the door cautiously. "Lucienne?" The older man stepped in, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Jonathan closed the door behind him. "Another one." Lucienne handed him the envelope. "Lillian has the original paternity test, the first one. The one that said you weren't the father. It was doctored." Jonathan's brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "She had someone alter it. A doctor from Marseille, someone you and I worked with during the French trade partnership years ago. He owed her a favor. She had it falsified, signed, and filed. That's why Emily's mother believed you didn't want to be involved." Jonathan's heart pounded. "You're telling me Lillian knew about Emily all these years?" Lucienne nodded. "And she made sure you didn't." Jonathan ripped open the envelope. Inside was a copy of the original document, the falsified test, with an attached letter, handwritten by the doctor. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was told it was for the child's protection. I see now that was a lie." Jonathan sank into a chair, stunned. "She manipulated us all," Lucienne said. "This wasn't just corporate strategy. It was personal. She wanted to control you, control the narrative. Emily threatened that." Jonathan stood slowly, rage pulsing in his veins. "She used an 8-year-old girl to play God with my life." Lucienne placed a hand on his shoulder. "You need to go public. Expose her before she buries this deeper." Jonathan looked at him, eyes fierce. "No, I'm not just going public. I'm going after her." Across the city, Lillian Gates stood in front of a mirror, carefully applying lipstick. Her phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "He knows." She stared at it, unblinking, then replied, "Doesn't matter. The board won't believe it." Not after last week's performance, but even she felt the ground beginning to shift. Later that day, Jonathan summoned an emergency press conference, Cameras rolled, reporters packed the lobby, and millions watched live as the CEO of CraneTech took the stage, not as an executive but as a father. "I have a confession," he began. The room fell into silence. "For years, I didn't know I had a daughter. Not because I ran, not because I denied her, but because someone ensured I would never find out." He paused, letting the weight land. "I'm talking about a deliberate falsification of medical records, a betrayal not just of me, but of Emily, a child who deserved truth, love, and protection." Gasps spread through the crowd. "This was a lie orchestrated by someone I trusted, someone in this company." He held up the document. "And today, that ends." From the shadows, Lillian stepped forward, face cold, shoulders squared. But this time, she wasn't smiling. Because the cameras had already turned on her. The room erupted. Flashes from cameras stung the air like lightning strikes. Reporters shouted over each other, their voices frantic. Who falsified the documents? Will there be criminal charges? Is CraneTech liable for the cover-up? Jonathan raised his hand to silence them. His voice remained firm, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. "The person responsible is Lillian Gates, former head of global partnerships. She deliberately concealed the existence of my daughter, Emily Lambert, by manipulating a DNA test and withholding evidence that would have changed the course of both our lives." The crowd gasped. Some turned to Lillian, who now stood like a statue, pale but defiant. "She did this," Jonathan continued, "to control narratives, to manipulate corporate power, and to prevent any distraction to her vision of this company. But Emily was never a distraction. She was the truth we didn't know we needed." A murmur spread. Several reporters backed away from Lillian, cameras swiveling toward her with a hunger for scandal. Lillian stepped forward at last. "I acted in the interest of the company," she said, her voice sharp, trembling only slightly. "You, Jonathan, were spiraling after the loss of your wife. You were unstable. I did what I had to do to protect CraneTech." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "Don't you dare use my grief as an excuse." Lillian's eyes flicked toward the cameras. "And now you're using a child for redemption. What makes you any better?" Jonathan didn't flinch. "Because I'm not hiding anymore." A voice rang out from the back of the room, clear, youthful, and unmistakable. "I'm not hiding either." Heads turned. Emily stood in the doorway holding her sketchbook. She walked slowly through the crowd, past the stairs, the lenses, the tension. She reached Jonathan's side, looked up at him, then out to the crowd. "She kept my dad from me," she said simply, "but he didn't run. He's here now and he's trying." Her mother stepped in behind her, holding her hand. "I don't want anyone else to make decisions for me. Not anymore." The room went silent again, not for drama, but because truth has a way of silencing everything else. Lillian tried one last move. "You think they'll let you keep this company now? After everything?" Jonathan stepped forward. "Let them try. Because this company isn't built on lies anymore." Within hours, Lillian was suspended pending legal review. The board, now fractured, scrambled to control the narrative, but public opinion had already swung. Emily became not just a prodigy, but a symbol of resilience. In the weeks that followed, CraneTech began rebuilding, not from scandal but from truth. Jonathan drafted a new mission for the company, one built around mentorship, transparency, and courage. And Emily? She was given her own office, small, bright, with a sign she hand-drew herself, translator and truth-teller. But one day, weeks later, a new letter arrived. No name, no return address. Just a single line handwritten on the back of a boarding pass. "You still don't know everything." The envelope sat on Jonathan's desk like a riddle, untouched for several minutes. He stared at the handwritten note again. "You still don't know everything." The boarding pass was for a flight that had landed weeks ago, originating from Marseille, France. He turned the envelope over once more. No name, no address, just a precise, slanted handwriting he didn't recognize. He showed it to Lucienne later that evening. Lucienne's face drained of color. "What is it?" Jonathan asked. Lucienne ran a hand through his hair. "I know that handwriting. I haven't seen it in years." Whose is it? Lucienne hesitated. My sister. Jonathan blinked. Emily's great-aunt? Lucienne nodded. But we haven't spoken since before the baby. She cut ties with the family, said we were living in denial, said there were secrets no one wanted to face. Jonathan sat back. You think she's here? In New York? Lucienne didn't answer right away. He picked up the boarding pass and examined it closely. She always loved puzzles. If she sent this, it's because she knows something we don't. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He walked the apartment floor, pausing outside Emily's door more than once just to hear her breathing. He finally returned to his study and opened Emily's original hospital records, something he had obtained through his legal team during the early investigation. But this time he noticed something he hadn't before. A single line scribbled in the corner of the form, half faded beneath a coffee stain. See additional file, LL7. The next morning, he called the hospital directly. It took hours, but eventually a courier arrived with a slim beige folder marked LL7, restricted. Inside were several documents. One was a private note from a nurse, addressed to the attending physician. Jonathan read aloud. The birth was difficult. The mother was heavily sedated. The father was never present. But a woman, speaking fluent French, insisted she had authority over the child's documentation. She provided identification, but the ID number was fake. She gave specific instructions to redact the father's name. Jonathan's hands trembled. He kept reading. When asked why, she said, because one day the child will need to choose who her father is, not be told. Lucienne arrived minutes later. Jonathan handed him the letter in silence. Lucienne read it, then slowly sat down. It wasn't just Lillian, he whispered. Jonathan nodded. Someone else helped erase the truth. Lucienne looked up. Or rewrite it. And then Emily's mother walked into the room, holding a familiar photo, one Jonathan had never seen. It showed her in the hospital bed after Emily's birth. And beside her wasn't Jonathan. It was a woman. The same woman from the note. She told me I'd be safer if I let the past go, she said. Jonathan's blood ran cold, because if that woman had access to hospital records, to legal documents, to Emily's first hours of life, then someone with real power had orchestrated the cover-up. And they weren't finished yet. The photo haunted Jonathan. The woman standing beside Emily's mother in the hospital room wore a tailored coat, her hair pinned neatly, her expression poised, controlled. She didn't look like family. She looked like an agent. Lucienne stared at the image for a long moment. That's not my sister. Jonathan looked up sharply. What? Lucienne nodded. I thought it might be, but no. That woman's younger, colder. My sister was emotional. This woman looks like she was managing a situation. Emily's mother, sitting across from them, spoke softly. She said she was with the Trust. I thought she meant some kind of charity. Jonathan's mind clicked into overdrive. The Trust, he repeated, voice trailing. Then he stood suddenly and crossed the room to his safe. From it, he pulled a box, old, dust-covered, and opened it. Inside were remnants from his early career, notes, old business cards, contracts. He rifled through them, stopping when he found a faded pamphlet, The Lambridge Trust, Protecting Futures, Guarding Families. I knew that name, Jonathan whispered. They approached me after my wife died, said they wanted to help me focus on my work, offered to manage personal matters. Lucienne stood. That's not a charity, that's a shadow organization. Jonathan stared at the pamphlet, and they were involved in Emily's birth. It all connected. The falsified documents, the withheld identity, the carefully managed lie. The Lambridge Trust hadn't just manipulated paperwork. They had designed Emily's life. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Jonathan called an emergency meeting with only 3 people: Lucienne, Emily's mother, and a cybersecurity consultant he trusted implicitly. I need to know everything about the Lambridge Trust, he told the consultant. Their donors, their agents, their real purpose. The woman nodded. Give me 72 hours. But before the meeting ended, Emily's mother placed something else on the table, a small sealed envelope. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," she said, her voice trembling. "But I did. She gave it to me when Emily was born. Said to give it to her when she turned 18. I never opened it." Jonathan took the envelope slowly. On the front, in the same handwriting from the boarding pass, "For Emily, when she is ready to know." They didn't open it. Not yet. But the message was clear. Someone had orchestrated Emily's life from the shadows, not for love, not for safety, for control. And now that the truth was unraveling, the Lambridge Trust would come back. Because secrets that deep don't stay buried, they pull. 3 days later, the cybersecurity consultant returned, eyes wide, pale from lack of sleep, gripping a folder like it might explode. Jonathan, Lucienne, and Emily's mother sat in his private office, tense and silent, as the woman laid the file on the table. "I don't know who you've crossed," she began, "but this isn't a trust. It's a surveillance network. Global, private, old money, old names. They operate under a dozen shells, but everything traces back to the same node." Jonathan leaned in. "What node?" "The Lambridge estate in Luxembourg, founded in the 1940s. Publicly, it's a philanthropic foundation. Privately," she slid a photo across the table. It showed the same woman from the hospital, older now, grayer but unmistakable. Her name, Helena Lambridge. Lucian whispered, "I've heard that name before. In diplomatic circles. She funds cultural exchanges, humanitarian tech, and rumors say political leverage. She's not just powerful," the consultant continued. "She's strategic, and Emily wasn't the first child they tried to influence, but she might be the first who didn't follow the path." Jonathan clenched his fists. "Why Emily?" Her mother answered softly. "Because of you. They didn't want her growing up under your influence. After your wife died, you were volatile, grieving, but also dangerous to the people who wanted to control your legacy." Jonathan's breath caught. "So they erased me from her story." "More than that," the consultant said. "They built a new one." Silence fell. Then Emily walked into the room. She carried the sealed envelope, the one meant for her 18th birthday. She held it out. "I want to open it now." Her mother hesitated. "Emily, I need to know." Jonathan looked at Lucienne, who nodded. Together they opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter, ink faded but elegant. It wasn't from Helena. It was from Jonathan's late wife. "To the daughter I never met," it began. Jonathan's heart stopped. "If you're reading this, then others made choices I never agreed to. I learned too late that there were plans for your future, designs, people who believed your life could be sculpted like a company strategy. I tried to stop them, but I was silenced. Your father, Jonathan, never stopped loving, even when he didn't know you existed. He is more than a CEO. He is your safe harbor." The letter ended with a line scrawled in haste. "They'll come back when the truth surfaces. Be ready, be brave, and don't let them define you." Tears fell freely. Jonathan held Emily close. The room felt sacred. And then Lucienne's phone buzzed. A message. No sender, just coordinates, and one line. "She's watching." Jonathan stood. "It's not over." Lucienne nodded. "No, it's just beginning. Because truth, once uncovered, doesn't end stories. It ignites them.